He'd already walked away with 50 to $70 million in cash. His bank accounts were completely set for life. The game was officially won. And then the corporate buyers slid a contract across the table and tried to hand him another $60 million, completely guaranteed, no targets, no catches. All he had to do was show up to an office for a few more years and stay put. He looked at the contract, he looked at the check, and said no. Less than a year later, he sat down at a keyboard and typed a sentence that billionaires and corporate PR teams tried desperately to hide from the public. I left 60 on the table. I have no income. Who walks away from a literal mountain of generational wealth on purpose? And what happens to a guy like that the day after he walks out the door? We're going to answer exactly that, plus look at the bizarre thing he ended up doing next to fill the void. If you've ever built something real, a company, a career, or a life wrapped in decades of high stakes pressure, then stick around, because later in this video, we'll break down the exact practical playbook for how to avoid hitting that same wall. His name is Vinay Hiremath. He co-founded Loom, the video messaging tool used by millions of engineering teams globally. He built it from the ground up, carrying the 2 a.m. payroll panic, the daily operational weight that nobody else sees. When Atlassian bought Loom for $975 million, it was a massive tech triumph. For Hiremath, the exit meant a personal payout between $50 and $70 million. He had crossed the finish line. That's when the buyers introduced the retention package, $60 million in unvested stock and cash, designed to anchor him through the transition. For almost anyone else, a $60 million bonus is a no-brainer. You take the cash, you put your time in, and smile for the press release. Instead, Hiremath walked away. He refused the retention package and left millions sitting on the table. Why? Because he realized something terrifying that most founders discover too late. When you spend a decade or more tying your identity and self-worth to a fast-growing company, your brain gets rewired. You aren't just managing a business, the business is running you. When you sell it, the cash hits the account, but the routine holding your life together vanishes overnight. Hiremath didn't walk away because he was lazy. He walked away because taking that extra $60 million meant performing a version of himself he was done being. Every vesting year was another year playing a character in a movie he had already finished shooting. And the moment he stepped out, the silence hit. He described feeling entirely disconnected, adrift, floating in an empty room with no calendar, no emergency, and no destination. Before we get to what he did next, let me pause right here and ask you a real question. And you can drop your answer in the comments below. If you were in his shoes, already sitting on $50 million in cash, would you have taken the extra $60 million to play the corporate game a few more years, or would you have walked right out the door? So once he was out, he tried on a few classic post-exit cliches. He met with robotics investors, trying to convince himself that building a robotics company was his next big calling. But he caught himself. He admitted he didn't want a robotics empire. He just wanted to look like Elon Musk. He called that realization incredibly cringe. Then came what nobody expected. To fill the massive void, he didn't buy a yacht. Instead, he spent 5 to 8 hours a day teaching himself complex physics from scratch, just to give his brain something dense enough to chew on so it didn't eat itself alive from boredom. And after all that, he went out and landed an entry-level engineering internship at a small startup called Spectre, learning from scratch like a 22-year-old kid. The exit is supposed to be the reward, so why does winning feel like an empty room? If you look across founders who pull off massive exits, Hiremath's story is a predictable cycle. There's the arrival kind of fallacy. We believe financial freedom permanently solves our internal friction. And when it arrives, money stress vanishes, leaving a total vacuum of purpose and meaning. There's a travel illusion. High achievers book round the world trips to outrun the sudden quiet. Within 6 months, they realize location changes did not fix a missing mission. And I'd say number three is a scoreboard void. When your worth is tied to producing massive outcomes under extreme pressure, removing pressure, it doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like irrelevance. So there's some takeaways for what actually can help. If you're looking down the barrel of an exit or stepping out of the C suite, how do you insulate yourself from that crash? To me, here are three rules. First, separate your money plan from your identity plan. Everyone manages investments and taxes, but almost nobody plans their time. If your self worth is tied to running the company, your net worth is 100% invested in your past. Treat an empty calendar as a warning sign. High performers think they want zero obligations, but by day 10, your nervous system interprets that blank space as a loss of relevance. You really do need fixed anchors that require you to show up for others. And I would say shift from player to coach early. Survivors don't disappear into a hammock. They channel decades of experience into advisory roles, writing, or mentoring, keeping their problem solving mind alive without carrying the payroll weight. As for my final thoughts, I'd say stepping down to study physics and take a junior internship that Vinay did, it's not a failure. It's the most honest response possible. No amount of money replaces the simple, grueling joy of solving hard problems. That's how he felt. Now, I didn't buy or build a tech giant like Loom, but I know what post career shock feels like. After decades in management, I built my own business. When I finally closed the door on it for good, I found myself standing in my kitchen at 9 a.m. with a cup of coffee going cold, kind of staring at a blank wall. That went on for a while until I finally figured it out. Now, nobody needed an email. Nobody was calling my cell phone. It wasn't relief. It was a strange, kind of quiet void at the time. I realized I had prepared a plan for my money, but completely neglected a kind of a plan for myself. So don't wait until the calendar goes completely blank to ask the hard question. The money handles yesterday. You are the only one who has to design tomorrow. So check out the free book After the Exit. It's linked below. You can see it on my website. Drop a comment. When you picture walking away from what you do every day, what's the real fear underneath it? Hit subscribe. Build your plan B, not just the one for your money. I'll see you in the next episode.